They say your family is supposed to be your safe place. The people who catch you when you fall, who clap the loudest when you win. I believed that for a long time. I held on to it even when the evidence started stacking up against it. I held on to it the way you hold on to something you know is already gone. Fingers tight, knuckles white, because letting go feels worse than the lie. My mother told me I wasn't built for pressure when I was 26 years old. She said it calmly, the way she said most things that were designed to cut. We were sitting at her kitchen table, the same one I grew up doing homework at, and she had her coffee mug in both hands, and she looked at me like she was delivering a weather report. You don't handle stress well, you never have. Your sister is better suited for this. That was it. No preamble, no softening, just the verdict. And the worst part, I almost believed her. I had been working at my family's event planning company since I was 22. Not because I needed the job. I had a degree in business management from Ohio State and 2 other offers on the table when I graduated. I chose to come work for my parents because I loved what they had built. Sycamore & Co. had been running for 19 years. My mother started it out of our garage when my sister and I were in elementary school, booking small birthday parties and retirement dinners out of a 3-ring binder. By the time I joined, we had a real office in Columbus, a staff of 11, and contracts with 3 of the biggest corporate clients in Central Ohio. I was proud of that. I wanted to be part of it. My sister had been there 4 years ahead of me. She had never gone to college. That was always a point of tension in our house that got handled by simply not discussing it, and she had worked her way up from answering phones to managing vendor relationships. She was charming in a way I was not. Easy with people, quick to laugh, good at making clients feel like they were the most important person in the room. I knew that. I respected it. What I did not know for a long time was that she had been quietly repositioning herself as my mother's second-in-command in a way that left very little room for me. My first year, I didn't notice. I was learning the business, head down, doing everything from pulling permits to building out our internal project management system, which, before me, was a combination of spreadsheets, sticky notes, and my mother's memory. I built something cleaner, centralized. I trained the whole staff on it. My mother told me it was good work. She seemed pleased. My second year, I started pitching. I had ideas for expanding our corporate event division. We were leaving money on the table with clients who wanted multi-day conferences and were going elsewhere because we didn't have the operational capacity. I put together a full proposal, revenue projections, staffing plan, timeline, risk assessment. I stayed late 3 nights in a row to get it right. I brought it to my mother in a proper presentation, printed copies, the whole thing. She listened. She nodded. She said she'd think about it. 6 weeks later, my sister presented the same expansion plan at our quarterly staff meeting. Same structure, same revenue projections, different font. I sat in that meeting and felt something go very cold inside me. I looked at my mother. She was nodding along, smiling, saying this is exactly the kind of vision we need. She didn't look at me once. After the meeting, I waited until the room cleared out. I asked my mother, as calmly as I could manage, why my sister had presented my proposal. My mother set down her pen. She looked at me with that patient, slightly tired expression she used when she thought I was being difficult. Your sister helped refine it, she said. She understood the operational side in a way that made it more presentable. I asked if my name would be on it anywhere. In any documentation, any client materials, anything. She said that wasn't really how it worked, that we were a family business and ideas belonged to the company. I went home that night and sat in my car in my apartment parking lot for 40 minutes before I could go inside. I told myself it was a miscommunication. I told myself my mother wasn't being deliberate. I had been telling myself versions of that story for 2 years by then, so I was practiced at it. I kept working. I kept building. I redesigned our vendor negotiation process and saved the company roughly $40,000 in annual contract costs. I brought in a new client, a regional healthcare network that wanted quarterly employee appreciation events, by cold calling their HR director and pitching us over the phone. I project managed our biggest event to date, a 3-day corporate retreat for a manufacturing company out of Cincinnati, and it came in under budget and got us a 5-star review that we used in our marketing materials for the next 2 years. I was good at this. I knew I was good at this, and I kept waiting for my mother to know it too. What happened instead was that my sister got a new title, Senior Director of Operations. There was no equivalent title created for me. When I asked about it, my mother said they were looking at restructuring, and it wasn't the right time. When I asked what restructuring meant for my role, she said something vague about the business evolving and how everyone's responsibilities might shift. 2 months later, my sister moved into the larger office. I started keeping records. Not because I was planning anything, I wasn't, not then, but because something in me had started paying closer attention. I documented my projects, I saved my emails, I kept a folder on my personal drive of every proposal, every pitch, every operational change I had initiated. I don't know exactly why I started doing it. Instinct, maybe. The same instinct that makes you take a photo of your parking spot, so you don't forget where you left the car. The moment things became completely undeniable happened on a Tuesday in March. We were in the running for the largest contract we had ever pursued. A regional law firm with 5 offices across Ohio that wanted a full-service event partner for their entire calendar year. Conferences, client dinners, holiday events, recruiting events. It was a $380,000 annual contract. I had been the one to identify the lead. I had been the one to reach out to their office manager and get us on their radar. I had spent 6 weeks building the pitch deck and the service proposal, and the detailed timeline of how we would staff and execute their events calendar. The day before the presentation, my mother called me into her office and told me I wouldn't be going. I thought I'd misheard her. I actually asked her to repeat herself. She said my sister would be leading the presentation, that the client had expressed a preference for speaking with senior leadership, and since my sister now held the senior director title, it made more sense for her to represent the company. I asked if I could at least be in the room. She said she didn't think that was necessary. I asked who had built the pitch. She paused for just a second. Then she said the pitch was a company effort, and that I should focus on the Greystone event coming up the following weekend. I left her office and walked directly to the bathroom and stood over the sink for a while. I wasn't crying. I was doing that thing where you're too angry to cry and too shocked to process, so you just stand very still and breathe. My sister got the contract. She came back from the presentation with a signed letter of intent, and my mother took the whole staff to dinner to celebrate. I sat at that dinner table and ate my food and smiled when people smiled at me and said all the right things. I had gotten very good at that. What I had not gotten good at, what I would never get good at, was pretending it didn't matter. I started having recurring thought around that time. It was quiet and it came mostly at night. What are you still doing here? I didn't have a good answer. Loyalty, maybe, hope. The particular stubbornness of someone who has invested too much to walk away and doesn't know yet that walking away is exactly what they should do. The situation came to a head in June. There was a conflict over how we handled a vendor dispute. One of our catering partners had delivered significantly below spec at a corporate luncheon and was refusing to issue a partial refund. I had handled the complaint initially, documented everything, and had a clear case for withholding 20% of the payment per our contract terms. I sent my recommendation to my mother and copied my sister. My sister responded to my mother, not to me, with a different recommendation. She said we should pay the vendor in full to preserve the relationship. My mother went with my sister's recommendation. The vendor charged us full price and gave us substandard food again at the next event. I wrote up the outcome. I laid out exactly what the documentation showed, exactly what each recommendation had been, and exactly what the result was. I sent it to my mother. She called me into her office and told me I needed to work on how I communicated, that I came across as accusatory, that running a business required building relationships, not just following the letter of contracts, and she wasn't sure I fully understood that yet. I was 30 years old. I had a business degree. I had saved that company tens of thousands of dollars and brought in clients and built systems that were still running. And my mother was telling me I didn't understand how business worked. I said, very carefully, that I disagreed with her assessment. She looked at me the way she had looked at me at the kitchen table 4 years earlier, patient, slightly tired. I know you think you're right, she said. You always think you're right. That's part of the problem. I handed in my notice the following week. It was not a dramatic exit. I gave 4 weeks. I trained the person taking over my projects. I transferred everything cleanly and professionally. And I walked out on my last day with a box of my things, and a handshake from my mother, and a hug from 2 co-workers who actually seemed to mean it. My sister did not come out of her office. The first 3 months after I left were the hardest of my professional life. I had savings, enough to cover 6 months of living expenses without panicking, but that did not stop the 3 a.m. thoughts. I had walked away from a family company. I had no obvious next move. I had a portfolio of work that on paper was credited mostly to Sycamore & Co., rather than to me specifically, because that was how things worked there. Or rather, how my mother had arranged for things to work. I started freelancing, small stuff at first, helping a friend's nonprofit plan their annual gala, picking up some project coordination work for a hospitality consulting firm. I was good at it, and the word got around in the way that word gets around when you actually deliver. About 4 months after I left Sycamore, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a woman named, I still remember this, Philippa. She was the director of corporate partnerships at the healthcare network I had brought in as a client 3 years earlier. The one I had cold called. The one that had become one of Sycamore's most reliable annual contracts. She said she had heard I'd left the company. She said she wanted to talk. I met her for coffee the next morning. I thought it might be a reference request or a general catch-up. I wore a blazer anyway, because some instincts don't go away. Philippa told me she had always assumed I was the primary contact at Sycamore, because I had been the one who originally pitched them, and the one who managed their events personally for the first 2 years. When I left, she had been handed off to my sister. She said the transition had been fine, professional, no complaints. But she also said she had been keeping an eye on some internal changes at her organization, and they were looking to bring their event coordination in-house, which would mean hiring an outside consultant to build and manage a new events program from scratch. She wanted to know if I was available. I kept my expression neutral. I nodded and said I would love to hear more. The scope she described was significant. Not just consulting. She was talking about a 12-month engagement, then the possibility of a longer-term role as they scaled. They wanted someone to design the whole infrastructure, the vendor relationships, the processes, the playbooks. Essentially, everything I had already built once. The number she mentioned for the engagement was more than I had made in any full year at Sycamore. I said yes. I want to be clear about something because it matters. I did not reach out to Philippa. I did not call Sycamore clients when I left. That would have been wrong, and I knew it was wrong, and I did not do it. Philippa found me because she wanted to. She had kept my personal contact information from before my departure, because she had worked with me directly and she trusted the relationship. That is not poaching. That is what happens when you do the work and you do it right. I signed the contract on a Thursday afternoon. I sat in Philippa's conference room and signed my name, and then I drove to a park near my apartment and sat in my car for a while. Not like before. Not the numb, stunned stillness of the parking lot after my mother's kitchen table verdict. Something quieter, something that felt, honestly, like relief. I found out that my mother and sister learned about it approximately 2 weeks later. I was not the one who told them. Philippa's organization and Sycamore did not have an exclusivity agreement. I had checked, because of course I had checked, and there was no legal issue. But I heard through someone we both knew that my mother had called Philippa directly to ask what had happened. Philippa, I was told, was polite but clear. She said the organization had decided to go in a different direction for their events program. She did not mention me by name in that call. She didn't have to. A few weeks after that, my sister texted me. I had not heard from her since I left. The text said, "I heard you took the Kellerman Health account." That was a Sycamore client. I looked at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, "They reached out to me. I hope the business is going well." I did not say anything else. I did not explain, defend, or justify. There was nothing to explain. I had done nothing wrong. And I had spent enough years of my life explaining myself to people who had already decided what they thought of me. My sister did not respond. The engagement with Philippa's organization went well. Better than well. By month 4, they were talking about accelerating the timeline. I hired 2 part-time contractors to help manage the execution load. I built the vendor network from scratch, negotiating rates that saved them money immediately. The first major event I ran for them, their annual leadership conference, 400 attendees, 2 days, downtown Columbus, came off so smoothly that Philippa sent me a handwritten note afterward. I still have it somewhere. By the end of the year, we had signed an ongoing partnership agreement, not a consulting engagement anymore, a real partnership, revenue sharing, my name on the materials, a seat at the table when they made decisions about the program. It was everything I had ever wanted at Sycamore, except built from nothing by me for people who wanted me there. I ran into my mother once, about 8 months later. It was at a charity fundraiser. We ended up at the same table for the cocktail hour, which was the kind of thing you can't really escape gracefully in a mid-sized city. She looked good. A little tired, maybe. She asked how I was doing. I told her I was doing well. She asked if I was still doing event work. I said yes. She nodded. She picked up her drink. Then she said, almost like it slipped out, "I didn't think you'd stick with it." I looked at her. She looked at me. There was a whole conversation that could have happened in that space. 4 years of it. Every meeting I was left out of, every proposal presented under someone else's name, every time I sat across from her and waited for something to change. I didn't have it. I didn't need to. I just smiled. Neither did I said, and that was true. There were nights, plenty of them, when I didn't think I'd stick with it either. When the freelance clients were slow and the savings account was shrinking, and I lay awake wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life by walking away from a company that, whatever its failures, was at least stable. But there's something nobody tells you about leaving a situation where you've been consistently underestimated. The clarity that comes after. The way you start to understand, slowly, what your actual capabilities are when they're not being filtered through someone else's fixed idea of who you are. You stop asking for permission. You stop waiting to be seen. You start doing the work because the work is real and you are real and the results are real and they belong to you. My mother said I wasn't built for pressure. She wasn't there when I was managing a 400-person conference on 3 hours of sleep because a vendor pulled out 24 hours before the event, and I had to rebuild the catering plan from scratch by midnight. She wasn't there when I negotiated my first partnership agreement across a conference table with 2 people who had been in the events industry longer than I had been alive. She wasn't there when Philippa called me, out of the blue, because I had done the work years ago and the work had not been forgotten. She wasn't there for any of it, but I was, and honestly, that's enough.